This video is part of a playlist where we build this, a Spotify web controller. We can play, pause a Spotify player, we can go to the next and previous track, and all of this built as a ReactJS Chrome extension. If you have no idea what this is, look in the description for details. This whole app is structured to mimic a cassette player. All of the assets we're developing have a ratio of 1.6. That's to say the width of an asset is 1.6 times larger than the height of that same asset. Now, however you choose to develop your own assets, just keep that proportion. And so I'm using a site called pixelartcss.com. It allows us to create pixel art and export it into different formats: CSS code, pngs, gifs. I won't be using the CSS code export function to scale properly, and we won't be using this site to make the gifs. We're just going to do it, or I'm going to do it, in a third-party program. I'm going to use GIMP. It's a free open source image editing tool. And so I'm just going to use pixelartcss.com to create the assets, the pieces of art, and we're just going to export to PNGs. So let's start by creating a cassette player. Remember, the ratio we want is 1.6. Now, I found the sweet spot to be 80 by 50 for a closed cassette player, and then we can bump that canvas size up to 92 by 57 to make room for an opened cassette player. Now, however you want to design your player is up to you. Just make sure you use the full width and height of your canvas for the closed player, and then bump that guy up, like I said, to 92 by 57 and go to work on the opened player. Also, don't include any buttons you want to be functional on this piece of art. We're just going to do that later in the HTML. When you're done, make sure to export those files as PNGs. And also, if you're not going to do this in one sitting, it takes a while. If you're not going to do this in one sitting, PixelArtCSS has this save feature. Just don't be afraid to use that. And so after you've done your decks, we do the same for the cassettes, same proportions, 1.6. I found a canvas size of 72 by 45 to work best for this guy. And also make sure to create 2 images of your cassettes. This is for the animation of the tape later on, the spinning of the tape of the deck of the cassette. So now that we have our images, we're going to do a bunch of scaling. So open up your favorite image editor. I'm using GIMP. We're going to be working on a 320 by 550 canvas. The added height, I know it's supposed to be 1.6, the proportion size, but the added height here gives us room for the animation later on. And so we'll start with a closed player. We're going to scale it to 320 by 200, and we're just going to copy that guy over to the canvas, and then we're just going to do the exact same thing for the open player. Scale it to 320 by 200, and copy it over. Now for our cassettes, this is where you have to do or play around with different scalings. Depending on how you created your player, the scale and the position of the cassette's going to change, so I can't give you any hard numbers on this. You're going to have to play around with it. But once you're happy with the alignment of these 3 items, the opened and closed cassette player and the actual cassette, we're going to start creating those gifs. Now, the loading gif is just 3 duplicate images with the cassette rotated differently each time. Depending on how you designed your deck, you should cut out different layers to make sure the cassette overlaps your deck properly. What I'm trying to say is just make this thing visually coherent. And so when you're ready to export to a GIF, I found a 100 millisecond frame rate to work best for this. Faster, slower, play around with the timing, do whatever you want. Onto the playing GIF. This is just 2 images with the different states, as I said earlier, different states of the cassette alternating just to create that illusion that the thing's actually rotating. Make sure everything's properly aligned, and when you're ready to export this to a GIF, I found a 150 millisecond frame rate. Works best here. Again, faster, slower, play around with the timing. And I have to say this, even though we're not using all of the space on top for this, make sure you export it at 320 by 550, not 320 by 200. And moving on to the pause GIF, I don't show you the process here. It's pretty basic. Depending on what you want to do with your deck when it's paused, it's going to be a static or animated image, a GIF, and just make sure that the cassette isn't spinning. And also, make sure to export this guy at 320 by 550 as well. And I don't show you here as well, but the default image of your deck, it's really simple. This is going to be used for the options page when the user chooses their cassette player or the deck. Just take any closed deck, no cassette, and export it at 320 by 200, not 320 by 550, 320 by 200. And so we have all of the visual assets created for our project. In the next phase, we're going to use these guys, and we're going to construct we're going to do the UI. We're going to get the UI, state, UX, all of that stuff using ReactJS. And so don't forget to give a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I'll see you guys in that next phase. Learn how to create Google Chrome extensions that take you from A to Z. What is JavaScript? What is HTML? What is CSS? How do they all work together to power web development? Then, how do we use those same tools to power Chrome extension development?